completely pissed that night. But of course, in the morning, they couldn't be a moment late, not a minute late. So Bill had Duke in the back of the car with his legs leaning out. He was lying in the back of the car with his legs leaning out the window. And they were driving like crazy from Shreveport, Louisiana, down to wherever the location was. And they got there in time. Duke got himself together. They all both stood up, and he said, and Pappy made them stand at attention and come over and smell his breath.
Make way for the new screen adventure from four-time Academy Award winner John Ford, The Horse Soldiers. Make way for the screen's two top stars in their most outstanding roles, John Wayne and William Holden.
Welcome to A Word on Western. Today we are thrilled to have a leading lady who worked with John Wayne. She worked with Robert Wagner. Today she's going to work with me. Let's give a big hand to Stefanie Powers. People don't realize, I know they love you for Heart to Heart as I do, everybody does. Of course the girl from Uncle too. But they don't realize your Western background. You must have been 12 years old when you started.
Yes, just about. Yes. I grew up with horses. My stepfather bred racehorses, and I was crazy about horses from the day I popped onto this earth, I think. One of his prized possessions was a silver saddle that belonged to Tom Mix. That was somehow lost in the shuffle when his breeding farm was sold to Desi Arnaz. But that held a place of great honor in the tack room, and his tack room was really something very special. Wasn't allowed to go in there very often, but especially unsupervised, that was a very bad thing for me to do.
Did your horseback riding then come in handy when you were making Westerns?
Well, I wasn't really allowed to ride on the ranch because it was a breeding ranch. There were studs, and there were brood mares and all the assorted, highly motivated, hormonal horses there. And so running around on horseback was not exactly encouraged. But all the kids in the neighborhood, and it was a pretty interesting neighborhood in Corona, California, the next farm was belonged to a man called Rex Ellsworth. All the Ellsworth kids had these ponies that we could go ride in the fields with, and we played cowboys and Indians. And when the fields were all turned over and nice and soft, we'd shoot each other off of ponies and take horse falls and all sorts of things. So I was predisposed for stunt work, which did come in handy. Especially on that movie that Clint Walker and I did in Mexico.
That film was Hardcase.
Hardcase.
Yes.
There was a second unit director who was also hired to do the stunt coordination by the name of Hal Needham. This guy who I met a few years earlier. And of course, we'd already had an experience with horses on McLINTOCK. They had brought, I had to do a ride on McLINTOCK out of this beautiful house, down a hill and off into the distance to go see my father, John Wayne.
I hope you'll have the good manners to not pry into other people's business. Your mother's and mine.
Pretty good shot, Daddy.
And they wanted a Palomino horse, and for some unknown reason, the wrangler got very, very picky about not letting me get on this horse and work it a little to know what I was dealing with. So I wasn't really able to understand, and I don't know if any of you are horse people, but you know that Palominos are all a little bit screwy. And
except for Trigger.
I did the ride, or the stunt girl did the ride. there was a stunt girl that did the ride first, and then the word came back from Hollywood that, because we were working in Arizona, that they saw her face. So I just had to get on board, you know, which of course I hated. But there was this sort of schizoid horse, and so we made the ride. We made the ride. We were going hell-bent for leather, and I started to, you know, rein the horse in.
Morning, Daddy.
And that was not happening. There was, in fact, no response whatsoever from the horse, and that horse put its head down and did this wonderful little thing called getting the bit between its teeth, and we were headed off into the blue horizon, except the blue horizon contained a barbed wire fence. So as I'm heading toward this barbed wire fence, trying to do everything I possibly can, and I got my feet out of the stirrups at least, and pulling this horse, a stuntman on a horse pulled in front of me with a horse behind him. We hit that horse and we went over the top of it and went bing, 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 bing. I have no idea where the horse wound up, but I know I wound up kind of flat on my back like a sack of potatoes. I guess I might have been knocked out for a second, but all I remember was John Wayne was over me with a thing, you know, tears were coming out of his eyes. He was so scared that I was hurt. And I said, "Did you get the fall?" Hal, who I met on McLINTOCK, was doing second unit, and he was also coordinating stunts. We found ourselves bereft of stuntmen and women, and certainly not enough to play the cowboys, the good guys or the bad guys, so especially not the Indians. So what could I do but help? So I put a wig on, and I became an Indian for Hal. And one day he I don't know, we were with a whole bunch of people, and I guess one of the greatest compliments I think I've ever received in my life was when Hal, in front of an awful lot of people, stood up and said, "Now there's one of the best riders in Hollywood."
Yes.
I was... No, I don't do those sort of stunts anymore. I play a nice, safe game called polo.
In that film, shooting it down in Mexico, Clint Walker had been one of the biggest stars in television as Cheyenne Bodie. What was he like?
Reserved. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a man who spoke very much. And, I mean, sense of humor is kind of crucial, isn't it?
Yes.
So he kind of needed that little bit of a sense of humor transfusion. He was a very nice man, but he kind of took himself very, very, very seriously. So he'd get really intensely deep into some of that dialogue and some of those lines, which you'd have to take with a grain of salt.
Well, Pedro Armendariz Jr. was in that film too.
Pedro was great fun, and we all had a wonderful time. And Pedro also sort of doubled as an Indian and was also one of the other stuntmen. You know, I was trying to remember exactly what the first miniseries that I was involved with was. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 5 Desperate Women, not to be confused with Desperate Housewives. 5 Desperate Women was the very first production for a newly formed company called Spelling and Goldberg. It was their very, very first production, and I think I still have somewhere the tarnished ice bucket that Aaron gave to people with the insignia on it. And we shot this in Catalina. There was a wonderful cast of characters. Joan was a fabulous, fabulous actress, and a bit mad. And she had decided that she was going to wear a wig. And it was a newfangled wig that was made out of plastic, but it looked really good. And she thought, well, this will be great because it's not going to be a real hair wig, so it's not going to be susceptible to all of the dramas of climate. But she failed to read all the instructions. So about care and maintenance of a plastic wig. So she decided to wash it. We filmed on the ferry, leaving from San Pedro to go to Catalina, and so we were in the salt air and all of this, and everybody's hair was frizzing and doing, except Joan's, that was really, plastic hair was fantastic. And so everybody decided to wash their hair. She decided to wash her wig. But then she thought it would probably be best if she put it near the heater to dry. And then we went off to dinner. Oh. So you can imagine, I don't have to tell you what that wig looked like when we came back. It was a mass of coagulated plastic. And of course, she'd already been established with that wig on. So all hell broke loose, and they had to send emergency boats back and forth to Saks Fifth Avenue to get another plastic wig. Those were just some of the dramas of the filming these.
She should have had two. You worked also on a Magnificent Seven film.
Oh yes, we used to call it. We used to call the Magnificent Seven. We'll never ride again after this movie. That was the sort of tone of the piece.
And that was Lee Van Cleef.
It was.
And who else was in that? Was that Mariette Hartley? Was she in that film?
No. Of the boys, there was Luke Askew, absolutely. Mickey Callan.
Oh, Pedro Armendariz again?
Pedro Armendariz again. Yes.
This is a good group.
Who else? Melissa Murphy.
And my notes say that Mariette Hartley's in that too.
She was Lee's wife.
Oh, she was Lee's wife. She got killed. Yeah. We got rid of her early on in the piece.
You know, maybe she couldn't ride. And it was the Magnificent Seven ride, and she couldn't ride.
Oh, yes. Well, I would have been better as one of the boys, I think.
Now, I know you said that Clint Walker was sort of stoic and withdrawn. Lee Van Cleef, who played some of the greatest villainous roles of all time, he's the leader in this. He's the good guy. What was he like off screen?
I think he was bewildered. He didn't quite understand what we were doing on this. You see, we weren't filming in anything that even remotely resembled a kind of weathered actual location. We were filming on the back lot at Universal Studios, and the tour was in its infancy. So periodically we would have to stop for the bus little tram coming by, where they would say, "Oh, the tour is here, you have to stop. You have to sit there, wave at everybody, hi," then get back to the serious business of
you know, Neville Brand had a way of stopping the tours from going by his...
Oh, he did? What did he do?
I really can't say. But the tour stopped going there.
We should have taken a note from him.
Well, you know, Bob Fuller said that they called their dressing area there Alcohol Row. And I guess they had a lot of fun there. It was
good old Western movies. It's a wonderful excuse for a tremendous amount of alcohol consumption. I'll have to thank Gene Autry, because I never thought I'd be sitting here when I first met Gene. All these years later, I had the great good joy of having spent time with he and Jackie in Ireland, when we were guests of Budweiser beer, when they would run the Budweiser Irish Derby. And everybody was sort of responsible for having to bring along with them then this kind of gang of friends that all that went to 5 or 6 different events in subsequent years. And it was like a big Irish house party. We all had to come with our own party routines, our music, our numbers. And so Gene and I first bonded when we started singing these old Mexican cowboy songs, you know. Allá en Rancho Grande. We did that a lot. But one day he said, "Well, we're going to Ireland and we better rehearse." So we went through this entire repertoire of Mexican songs that he had made famous on the radio. And that was our performance that year. I really enjoyed knowing him, and I'm so thrilled to be in this space that has his name on it.
Well, it's special, and Jackie, I know, sends her best to you,
I'm
too.
thrilled.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns. Today we have a special guest, Stefanie Powers, who has done some terrific films. You probably know her from Heart to Heart, but I know her as the fiance to Patrick Wayne in McLINTOCK, one of the biggest successes that John Wayne ever had. So
Was it?
It really was, and it started, I think, a trend in John Wayne's films to be
More
comedy.
comedic.
Yes.
Yes. Well, he actually had such a great sense of humor. You know, most people don't. Do you remember this fabulous story? It was during the. I think it was during the Vietnam crisis, and everybody was being very serious about Vietnam, and we all wanted very desperately to. My generation wanted very desperately to stop this war, and John Wayne was supporting the troops. He was an American. He would do anything to support the troops, and so he felt, you know, no matter what, the troops must be supported. And so in those days, that made him a kind of warmonger. And that wasn't seen as being very PC at the time. And there was an organization at Harvard called the, what's it called? It was the Something Apple Award. And it was a pejorative award. It was not given to people in order to honor them because of their excellence. It was given to people that they wanted to actually stick a pin in. John Wayne, never realizing that John Wayne would come to receive this award, they gave it to him and made a big announcement of it. And John Wayne arrived on the campus of Harvard in a tank.
Rolling down the streets in a tank.
He rolled down the streets in a tank, and with his hat off, waving at everybody, and they, of course, they loved him. Humor heals all wounds. That's it. You know, if you forget that, then life is not so happy.
He had a great sense of humor, I know.
He did.
And played pranks on people. I heard a
constantly.
story once where he was with Ward Bond, and Ward Bond was drunk and passed out, and John Wayne said, "Let's set his chest hair on fire."
Oh, gee.
And they did.
Story. I just remember a story that William Holden told me. And they were doing a movie.
It's The Horse Soldiers.
It's The Horse Soldiers.
John Ford.
All right, well, this is for posterity. John Ford had decided to billet everyone in the most uncomfortable place somewhere in Louisiana that was just horrible. The accommodations were terrible. There was a railroad, a train crossing, or something, but it was close to location, and Ford said, everyone's going to stay there. Well, Bill Holden was not under contract to Ford. He had no allegiance to Ford, and he felt that he, was not going to be under the thumb of Ford. So he decided not to stay there. He decided to stay in Shreveport, Louisiana, which was the town. And he had a brand new, he told me he had this, Bill always loved new cars. And every job always had to do with some new car that he was getting. And Bill had purchased a brand new, super fast Thunderbird. And so when Ford said, that he heard that Bill had decided to move to Shreveport, he thought he would intimidate him. Ford came over to him and said, yes, but if you are late 1 minute, you will wish. Anyway, you know what the rest of that could be. So Bill made sure that he was never late, and poor old Duke was there under the thumb of
Pappy
Ford looking
every time.
at the clock as to when he went to sleep and when he went to... And so Bill thought that it would be a great idea to spring Duke from prison. And so he contrived a plot with the editors and a couple of other people on the picture that the word would come back from Hollywood that Duke's teeth were a little yellow, that they needed, you know, to go to a dentist where he could, you know, whiten his teeth up a bit, give him a teeth cleaning, and that would be fine. And so Bill said, I'll drive him because it's in Shreveport. The dentist is in Shreveport, and so I'll drive him. And so the dentist, they had arranged to have a dentist stay after work, and this dentist thought, this is going to be the greatest moment of my life. I'm going to work on John Wayne. And of course, the whole thing was a ruse. So they got John Wayne in costume off the set, straight into Bill's car, and they drove to Shreveport to the dentist's office. When they got into the dentist's office and he got into the dentist's chair and the dentist was all ready to start working, Bill pushed the dentist aside and said, you can relax, and put a bottle of whatever it was, wild turkey or something that he drank right on there. They got pissed, completely pissed that night. But of course, in the morning, they couldn't be a moment late, not a minute late. So Bill had Duke in the back of the car with his legs leaning out. He was lying in the back of the car with his legs leaning out the window. And they were driving like crazy from Shreveport, Louisiana, down to wherever the location was. And they got there in time. Duke got himself together. They all both stood up, and he said, and Pappy made them stand at attention and come over and smell his breath.
He was cruel to everybody.
God, he could be such a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
We are a band of brothers, and daily to the sword, fighting for our liberty with treasure, blood, and toil.
Make way for the new screen adventure from four-time Academy Award winner John Ford, The Horse Soldiers. Make way for the screen's two top stars in their most outstanding roles, John Wayne and William Holden.
He could be tyrannical, but he was a great director.
And they all came back to him. Everybody always came back
guy.
because he got wonderful performances, and they said, we know he's going to mistreat somebody. Hopefully it's not me, and we'll give great performances, and we're just going to go do what he said.
I hid when he arrived on the set of McLINTOCK. Mm-hmm. I'd heard all these stories. And about his...
Well, he was still directing at that time, too.
No, he wasn't. He was retired. We'll go back.
Well, he did a film after that with Anne Bancroft and Sue Lyon that was with Mike Mazurki as a Mongol. And I think Woody Strode as a Mongol in that, too.
But there was something about him not having directed for a while.
So did you meet him when he showed up on...
Andy McLaglen got the flu. And...
So Ford actually directed something?
Ford actually showed up. And I remember the day because I was just a little actress, you know. I was just showing up to hit my marks and know my lines. And
Those are my things.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'd have known you anywhere, Miss Becky.
What do you mean?
Oh, I mean, you look so much like your mother.
Oh, Mr. Warren. Mother's much prettier than I am.
Play the daughter of Maureen and Duke, and so I just learned I had learned all about the lore of his temper, of John Ford's temper and his temperament, and the way in which he used to treat. Maureen told me stories about how it was to work on the Quiet Man, when he gave no direction to them for them to do the big run across the. They had to rehearse it, and he wouldn't allow them to rehearse it, and yet they rehearsed it on their own to try and figure out when they could fall, how he could pick her up, and all of this, and it came off very well.
It's a beautiful film.
But he, you know, was always stirring everything up. So Andy becomes ill. We all show up for work. We're standing waiting, and I said, "What's going on?" And everybody said, "We're waiting for Pappy." Pappy. Oh my God. We were all standing there waiting on this fabulous plateau in Arizona. And to get to this plateau where the farm was, where we were filming the house, the McLINTOCK house, you had to go up a ravine that was filled with a sort of a very fine powdery dust. and it created a big dust cloud when we would come up to the rise where the location was. So all of us were standing at attention when we saw in the distance this dust cloud. The company had sent a car for him. He eschewed the car, took a taxi. So this taxi, whoosh, 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 coming all through this dust, fine powder that's creating clouds and clouds of dust, and finally it pops up onto the plains, and it drives up to us all standing there, the full company in dress. It comes to a stop in a cloud of dust. The door opens. A foot comes out. Another foot comes out. And then the shoulders with this terrible old stained sort of safari jacket and this horrible old hat and the patch and the old red scarf. And he stands up. Duke had opened the door for him. And he pushes Duke aside and he walks over to Bill Clothier, who was diminutive by comparison. And he looks at him and he says to Clothier, "Let's get to work."
Did he do a shot?
Oh my, he directed for the next couple of days.
Really?
And he was so upset. All of these people who were his children, he considered them to be his children, were off making this movie, McLintock. They had never asked his opinion. They had never asked any help from him. He was so upset that when he showed up that day to rescue everybody, at the same time it was a victory for him. He just couldn't help but just stick it to everybody.
Well, and it has so many of the themes. It was family. There was a big brawl, a wonderful slapstick fight with the mudslide. All of that is so typical John Ford. And but Andy was really a different sort of director. He was lucky. Jim Arness helped give him a break because Duke had given Arness the break. And so what ended up happening is that Andy directed more Gunsmoke episodes than any other director. I mean, far more. And then he hooked up with Dick Boone.
Yes.
And directed about 120 episodes of Have Gun Will Travel.
And what about Paladin?
Yes, that was Paladin, Have Gun Will Travel. Where Hal Needham got his break. Hal worked on some of the films that you did, too.
Yes, I met Hal on McLintock, but then, you know, we did quite a few Westerns after that. And when we did a Western in Mexico, and we were living at the place that had only been built to house people like John Wayne and Kirk Douglas. They had statues of the two of them. The Mexico court
was Kirk's shorter than Duke's?
No, they were just busts.
Their charisma, they worked great together.
And the Mexico Courts motel was built literally for the movies that were made there.
And in Durango, Mexico?
In Durango, yeah.
I think Duke owned property there, too.
Oh, he might have.
Because he kept shooting films down there, I think, on his ranch.
He was constantly shooting films there. But Hal and I was the wrangler on this particular movie. And meaning the stunt coordinator and wrangler and getting all of the horses together and making sure that everything was. And nobody else knew really much about riding in the cast except Hal and me. And there were just a few people that came down from California to do this, plus the director and the cameraman. And so every time there was I doubled as a stuntman, doing some of the rides.
Nice. Did you get extra pay?
No, it was just fun.
Did Ted Post direct that? Is that who directed that film?
Gosh, was it? I don't remember.
John Llewellyn and Moxie, I think, directed Hardcase.
Right. So, my goodness, you've got a good memory.
Well, I love Westerns.
You
and,
do,
And you made another one, too, speaking of John Wayne, but it was a remake of his classic John Wayne film, Stagecoach, Marty Rankin's film.
John Ford was still alive at the time.
Gordon Douglas directed the remake of Stagecoach, and did he ask for John Ford's assistance or ideas or help in any of that?
The first day of shooting, poor Gordon received a one-word telegram from John Ford.
Oh, no.
He did. Why?
Why? Well,
I mean, that was, it's so cruel.
That's cruel. That is
really cruel.
And there's some nice things in the film.
You can't even try to compare the movies, you know. It's almost embarrassing to say that I was in it, but, you know, we tried.
But what a cast you had, too, though.
It was a fabulous cast.
Slim Pickens. Now, tell me a Slim Pickens story, because I met him once, and it was a thrill for me. He had started off as a rodeo clown.
He certainly did.
And was still making people laugh up until the very end.
He never forgot his rodeo beginnings, and I think that he was the most humble man, in spite of the fact that he had this extraordinary personality and this great, uninhibited way of acting. Everything he did was authentic. Everything. And he didn't have a fake moment in his acting.
I love it when he rides the bomb down in Dr. Strangelove.
I mean, how about that? Of all the movies, you look at him in Dr. Strangelove, he stands up against every one of those professional actors whose Broadway experiences have been. You know, he's right there with.
He was Rex Allen's sidekick, but he also did a terrific bad guy in the only film that Marlon Brando ever directed, One-Eyed Jack.
One-Eyed Jack.
Oh, that's a terrific film. And that started as a Kubrick film.
It certainly did.
So I heard that Brando fired Stanley Kubrick from One-Eyed Jack.
I heard it was different. From Stanley's voice.
Oh.
From Stanley's mouth, I heard he would have meetings with Marlon. When Marlon would put out, he'd say, "You have something to say, Stanley?" And he'd put a stopwatch out, and he'd open it up, a watch out, and he'd open it up, and he'd look. This is his meeting with the director, and he'd look at the watch until the time had expired. And finally, Stanley said, I just had to say to him, "Look, Marlon, you should direct this film. It's your film. It's your concept. You direct it."
And he did.
And he did. But it will always go on record that Stanley was fired. Stanley
walked
resigned.
away. What do you think of the film, the finished movie?
Well, it's flawed. I think when you look at it again after all these years, you look at it with nostalgia. It's a kind of Western. You know, don't forget, it's a Western that follows.
It's Billy the Kid.
Well, it's Billy, but it also follows in the tradition of Sam Peckinpah.
Before Peckinpah.
It's when you see it again, there's a nostalgia for a certain kind of approach to filmmaking. It's unfortunate he didn't direct more.
I agree.
Because he certainly had an extraordinary talent for it. His perversity, his perverse side, his perverse nature is really right out there. You know, I love that one line when he just, "Get them stinking fish out of here." Remember that one? I love that line. That was great. But there were some wonderful performances in it. And
that he was able to get from everybody.
And Pina Paisier, who was a very big star in Mexico, who had never been seen before in America and was an unconventional beauty, turned in a performance that was really worthy of an Academy Award nomination. Unfortunately, that never happened, and a few years later, she committed suicide. Not because she didn't win the Academy Award, but it was a shame that
Well, the film didn't find an audience at the time, and I because it was a little bit different. It wasn't quite the traditional Western that maybe people were expecting. And Brando not only gave a great performance himself, but he got terrific performances from everybody. Carl Malden, exceptional. Cathy Hirado, she could have gotten an Academy Award nomination for that, too. Ben Johnson as a bad guy.
Well,
oh,
you know what they say.
Wonderful.
We don't know whether he got the performances out of them, or whether he created the atmosphere, or just because of the choices he made. Because don't forget, every one of those people had given great performances. Many, many, many times. You could probably say every time they were cast. So the key to a great movie is casting the right actors.
It is.
So whether you're directing them, or you may get the credit for directing them, but they were all fabulous actors. The only person that was unusual and never seen before, and for Americans, was Pina Paisier.
When you were growing up, did you watch any Westerns? Did you have stars that you liked?
I grew up in the period of time when all we ever wanted to be was cowboys and Indians. I grew up watching old westerns at kiddies' matinees, Lash LaRue, silent films. They were all silent films because when you went to kiddies' matinees, the kids were all screaming. So the people who owned the theaters only rented silent movies.
Did you wear cap guns and wear an outfit?
No, my brother did. I didn't. No, I was something else.
So who were your
But
favorites?
then-
Lash LaRue, that's a good choice.
Lash LaRue's a great choice.
Yeah.
Lash LaRue, I liked it. And I loved, Roy and Dale. And
Great role
all
models.
those wonderful
Yeah.
happy trails to you until we meet again. I mean, well, how fabulous. Couldn't you fall in love that way? I had a horse. I just found an old photograph of me on top of a horse that was Rusty, very first horse.
How old were you when you got your horse?
I think I was about 6, 7.
Where'd you grow up out here?
California, where?
Where out here?
On this side of the hill, yes.
And you had a horse on this side of the hill?
Hollywood Hills.
And you had a horse here, or where was the horse boarded?
Was in Burbank.
Oh, near the equestrian center?
Near the equestrian center at Fred Bale's stables. I had horses at Fred Bale's stables for a long time. It's no longer there. Now I have horses at the next oldest stable yard there.
Well, I remember a few years ago going to the polo matches every
Yeah.
Saturday night. That was so much fun.
Wasn't it great? Did you ever see us?
Yes, oh sure. You probably saw me, but it wouldn't have meant anything at all. But we had box seats and went for years. It was the most fun because
Great fun.
nobody who we invited even knew this existed out here, and it was exciting.
It was the most exciting thing,
And
wasn't
what a great night! And then the parties and the dances afterwards, and
It was great.
it was great. I miss that a lot.
I do too. I miss it all the time. And my horses are out. Suzanne Pica was the person who ran all of that. She did that because she used to run the polo club in Michael Butler's family polo club in Oak Brook, outside of Chicago. And so she knew exactly how to run everything. And it was the most fabulous place. But it also was, there was an entrepreneur who was the head of it, so he had style and panache. And,
Got the sponsorship with Cadillac, and then when the Equestrian Center went bankrupt, it never was able to come back. It's
Never.
never come back, and it's a shame.